I gave my son a house worth $180,000 as a wedding gift, but his new gold digger wife arrived with her whole family. They treated me like a maid, spitting on the floor and ordering me to clean. She smiled, thinking she'd won. Then I put my plan into action. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw how Beulah treated the wedding caterer. The poor woman was just trying to refill the water glasses when my new daughter-in-law snapped her fingers like she was calling a dog. "Excuse me, the ice is melting too fast. Can't you see that?" Beulah's voice carried that particular tone I'd heard before from women who thought their wedding day gave them the right to treat others like servants. The caterer apologized quietly and hurried away. I watched this exchange from my table, my hands folded in my lap, trying to convince myself it was just wedding stress. After all, I'd just given Kent and Beulah the most generous wedding gift imaginable. A fully paid house worth $180,000. The deed was in my purse, signed and ready to transfer. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a beautiful kitchen with granite countertops, and a backyard perfect for the grandchildren I hoped would come someday. I'd used nearly all of my retirement savings, but seeing Kent's face when I told him about the house made every penny worth it. "Mom, are you serious? He'd asked when I first mentioned it 2 months ago. "A whole house. You're my only child," I'd told him, squeezing his hand. "I want you to start your marriage with security. No rent, no mortgage payments, just happiness." But now, watching Beulah at the reception, I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. She'd barely acknowledged my gift during the ceremony. No hug, no tears of gratitude, just a quick, "That's so sweet of you, Paulette," before turning back to her bridesmaids. The wedding venue was lovely, I had to admit. Kent had insisted on paying for everything himself, which made me proud. The flowers were white roses and baby's breath, simple but elegant. About 100 guests filled the reception hall, though I noticed most were from Beulah's side. Her family took up 4 entire tables, while my small group of friends and distant relatives occupied barely one. That's when I first met them, Beulah's family. Her mother, Dolores, was a heavy-set woman with dyed black hair and rings on every finger. She wore a dress that was just a shade too close to white and kept making loud comments about how fancy everything was. Her father, Ray, hadn't bothered with a tie and kept stepping outside to smoke, leaving ash on the venue's carpet. But it was Beulah's sister, Crystal, who made my skin crawl. She had the same calculating eyes as Beulah, but none of the pretense of manners. When she was introduced to me, she looked me up and down like she was appraising furniture. "So you're the one with the house," Crystal said, not bothering with pleasantries. "That's real generous." Real generous. The way she said it made me feel like I'd done something wrong, like my gift was somehow an inconvenience rather than a blessing. During dinner, I sat at the family table with Kent, Beulah, and her parents. The conversation kept steering toward money. How much the wedding cost, how expensive houses were getting, how hard it was for young people to get ahead these days. Dolores made several comments about how lucky Kent was to have a mother who could afford such things. "Not everyone gets handed a house," she said, cutting her chicken with more force than necessary. "Some people have to work for everything they get." I felt my cheeks burn. I'd worked my entire life. 43 years as a school secretary, saving every extra dollar, living modestly so I could help my son when he needed it. But something in Dolores's tone suggested she saw my gift as unearned wealth rather than a mother's sacrifice. Kent seemed oblivious to the undercurrent of tension. He was glowing with happiness, his arm around Beulah, talking about their honeymoon plans. Every few minutes, he'd catch my eye and mouth, "Thank you," across the table. My heart swelled with love for him. My sweet boy who'd grown into a good man. Or so I thought. The first real warning came during the cake cutting. As Kent and Beulah posed for photos, I overheard Crystal talking to some of Beulah's friends near the gift table. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and it's all paid off, Crystal was saying. "Beulah really hit the jackpot with this one. His mom's loaded." "How loaded?" one of the friends asked. "Loaded enough to give away houses like their birthday presents," Crystal laughed. "Makes you wonder what else she's got tucked away." I felt sick. They were talking about my son like he was a lottery ticket, about my gift like it was just the first installment of some larger inheritance they were expecting. But I told myself I was overreacting. Families talk about money at weddings. It's normal. The evening wound down with dancing and more drinks. I stayed until the end, helping to gather gifts and load them into cars. Beulah's family had several cars full of presents, while Kent and Beulah themselves would be leaving the next morning for their honeymoon in Cancun. As I hugged Kent goodbye, he whispered in my ear, "I love you, Mom. This is the best gift anyone could ever give us." I held him tight, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne, trying to memorize the moment. "I love you too, sweetheart. Be happy." But as I watched them drive away, Beulah's family following in a small convoy of cars, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. The way they'd looked at me all evening, like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be welcomed into their family. I drove home to my small apartment, the deed to their new house still in my purse. I'd planned to give it to them when they returned from their honeymoon, make it official with lawyers and paperwork. But something was telling me to wait, to watch, to be careful. I wish I'd listened to that voice sooner. The phone call came 3 days after Kent and Beulah returned from their honeymoon. "Mom, we have a situation," Kent said, his voice strained. "Beulah's family needs somewhere to stay temporarily. Their landlord sold their building and they have to be out by the end of the week." My stomach dropped. "All of them?" "Just her parents and Crystal. Maybe 2 weeks, 3 at most, until they find something else. You know how tight the rental market is right now." I did know. I also knew that temporary had a way of becoming permanent when it came to people who didn't want to pay rent. But this was my son asking for help, and Beulah was his wife now. Family. "Of course," I heard myself saying. "Whatever you need." That's how Dolores, Ray, and Crystal moved into the house I'd given my son. What I didn't expect was to be asked to help them move in. "You don't mind, do you, Mom?" Kent asked when I showed up with cleaning supplies, thinking I'd help them get settled. Beulah's been so stressed about the whole situation. Her family's not used to moving. Not used to moving, right. I bit my tongue and started carrying boxes. The first red flag was the sheer amount of stuff they had. For people who supposedly had to move on short notice, they certainly had accumulated a lot of belongings. Furniture, appliances, boxes and boxes of clothes and household items. It took 2 full days to get everything moved in. By the end of the first week, I barely recognized the house I'd given Kent. My beautiful, clean, modest home had been transformed into something else entirely. Dolores had rearranged all the furniture, replacing Kent's simple, neat style with her own collection of oversized, mismatched pieces. The refrigerator was covered with magnets and coupons. Ray's cigarette smell had settled into the curtains despite Beulah's supposed rule about smoking outside. But the real shock came when I stopped by on a Tuesday afternoon to drop off a casserole I'd made for Kent. I knocked on the door, waited, then used the spare key Kent had given me. "Hello?" I called out as I entered. "In here," came Dolores's voice from the living room. I found her on the couch in her bathrobe, watching television with the volume turned up loud. Dirty dishes covered the coffee table, and there were food crumbs ground into the carpet. "Oh, good, you're here," she said without getting up. "Can you clean this up? Crystal spilled something last night and I just haven't gotten to it." I stared at her. "Excuse me?" "The mess," she pointed vaguely at the carpet. "You know where the vacuum is, right?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. She was asking me to clean the house I'd given to my son. Not asking, really. Expecting. "Where's Kent?" I managed to ask. "Work. Beulah's at work too. It's just us girls today." Dolores smiled at me like we were conspirators. "Crystal's still sleeping. That girl needs her beauty rest." I set the casserole on the kitchen counter and left without another word. But something told me this was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched my gift house turn into something unrecognizable. Every time I visited, there was more mess, more damage, more of Beulah's family treating the place like a hotel where they never had to check out. Ray had taken over the garage, turning it into his personal workshop and smoking area. The smell was so strong I could detect it from the curb. Crystal had claimed the spare bedroom, but somehow her belongings had spread throughout the entire house. Makeup on the bathroom counter, clothes draped over furniture, shoes kicked off in random hallways. And then there was the way they talked to me. "Paulette, honey, could you pick up some groceries on your way over tomorrow?" Dolores asked during one visit. "We're running low on everything. Could you grab some cigarettes for Ray while you're out?" Crystal added, not looking up from her phone. "Marlboro Lights. He's particular about his brand." They weren't asking. They were telling. And somehow, I found myself saying yes. It started small. Picking up a few things at the store. Stopping by to help with cleaning since they were so busy looking for apartments. Bringing dinner because nobody had time to cook. Before I knew it, I was spending more time at the house than they were. Kent seemed completely oblivious to what was happening. When I tried to bring it up, he'd brush off my concerns. "They're family now, Mom, and it's just temporary. You know how hard it is to find affordable housing these days." But Kent, they're not even looking for places. Every time I ask about their apartment search, they change the subject. "You're overthinking this. Beulah says they have several leads lined up." Beulah says. Everything had become about what Beulah says. The breaking point came 3 weeks after they'd moved in. I arrived at the house to find Dolores and Crystal in the kitchen, going through a box I didn't recognize. "What's that?" I asked. "Oh, just some old stuff Kent said we could get rid of," Dolores said casually. I moved closer and felt my heart stop. They were packing up my grandmother's china set, the one I'd given to Kent when he moved out, thinking he might want something that had been in our family for generations. "Wait," I said, reaching for one of the plates. "That's my grandmother's china." Crystal looked up with that same appraising expression I'd seen at the wedding. "Kent said it was just taking up space in the cabinets. We found a buyer who'll give us $200 for the whole set." "You're selling my family's china?" "It's Kent's china now," Dolores said firmly. "And he asked us to handle it since you were always bringing him new dishes anyway." I felt the room spinning. They were selling my grandmother's dishes, and they were acting like I was the one being unreasonable. Like I was intruding on their right to dispose of property in the house I'd given my son. "I want to talk to Kent," I said, my voice barely steady. "He's at work," Crystal said, continuing to wrap the plates in newspaper. "But he knows we're doing this. We cleared it with him this morning." I left without another word, my hands shaking as I drove home. When I called Kent that evening, he seemed genuinely surprised by my upset. "Mom, it's just dishes. Beulah's family brought their own set, and there wasn't room for everything. I thought you'd be happy we found someone who wanted them. Those were your great-grandmother's dishes, Kent. They've been in our family for 80 years, and now they'll be in someone else's family. Isn't that better than them sitting in a cabinet where nobody uses them?" I hung up feeling like I'd been talking to a stranger. This wasn't the son I'd raised, the boy who used to help me carefully wash those same dishes after holiday dinners, who'd listened to stories about the relatives who'd owned them before us. That night, I sat in my apartment and really looked at what was happening. They weren't temporarily staying in the house. They'd moved in permanently. They weren't treating me like Kent's mother. They were treating me like their personal servant. And Kent was letting it happen. But what scared me most was the realization that they weren't finished with me yet. The truth came to me in the most ordinary way possible, through a forgotten folder in Kent's old desk. I'd gone to the house that Thursday morning to water the plants, something I'd been doing since Beulah's family had moved in because nobody else seemed to remember. The houseplants I'd carefully selected and placed throughout the home were dying from neglect, their leaves brown and brittle. Crystal was sprawled across the living room couch in her pajamas at 11 in the morning, talking loudly on her phone. She barely glanced up when I walked in, just waved vaguely in my direction like I was the cleaning lady. "No, girl, I'm telling you, this setup is perfect," she was saying into her phone. "Free house, free utilities, and the old lady even brings groceries." My hands stilled on the watering can. Old lady. That's what I'd become to them. I moved to the kitchen, where Dolores sat at the table with papers spread in front of her. At first, I thought she was finally looking at apartment listings. Then I got closer. "What are you working on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She looked up with that fake smile I'd grown to hate. Oh, just some financial planning. You know how it is. But I could see enough of the papers to recognize bank statements. Not apartment applications. Bank statements with Kent's name on them. Dolores, those look like… Nothing you need to worry about, honey, she said, quickly gathering the papers. Just helping Kent and Beulah get organized. Young people today don't know how to manage money. Something cold settled in my stomach. I finished watering the plants and was about to leave when I remembered Kent had asked me to look for an old tax document in his desk. Something about claiming education credits from his college years. The desk was in what used to be his home office, now converted into Crystal's second closet. Clothes hung from every available surface, and makeup covered the desk surface, but I could still access the drawers. The tax documents were in the bottom drawer, in a folder marked College, but as I pulled it out, another folder came with it, spilling papers across the floor. That's when I saw them, printouts from dating websites. Not recent ones. These were from 2 years ago, months before Kent had even met Beulah. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have. But something made me gather the papers and read them. The first page was a profile from a dating site called wealthyconnections.com. My hands trembled as I read the member profile. Beulah, 28 years old, looking for a serious relationship with financial security. Interested in family-oriented men with stable careers and assets. No games, no drama, just real connections with real futures. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the search parameters she'd set. Men aged 25 to 40. Income minimum, $75,000 annually. Home ownership, required. Family wealth, preferred. My son had been targeted. There were printed conversations between Beulah and other men. Messages where she asked detailed questions about their financial situations, their family backgrounds, their parents' assets. One conversation particularly made my blood run cold. My family's going through a rough patch, she'd written to some man named David. I'm really looking for someone who understands the importance of family support. Someone whose family could help us all get back on our feet. The same exact line she'd used on Kent. But there was more. Screenshots of text conversations between Beulah and Crystal, time-stamped from 6 months ago, right around the time Beulah and Kent had gotten engaged. Crystal, did you find out about the mom's finances yet? Beulah, working on it. He says she's got savings and owns her apartment, thinking she might be worth more than we thought. Crystal, good. Ray's been asking when we can move in. This cramped apartment is killing us. Beulah, soon. I'm working on getting her to pay for the wedding gift. Something big, maybe a house down payment. Crystal, a house? Holy shit, how much you thinking? Beulah, she's got that grandmother guilt thing going hard. I bet I could get her to buy us a whole house if I play it right. I had to read that exchange 3 times before it sank in. They had planned this. All of it. The wedding gift, the family moving in, everything. I hadn't been generous. I'd been stupid. My legs gave out and I sat down hard on the floor, papers scattered around me. Everything made sense now. The way Beulah had barely reacted to my gift announcement. The way her family had shown up with so much stuff for a temporary move. The way they treated me like hired help in my own gift. I kept reading, my heart breaking with each new revelation. There were printed emails between Beulah and her mother, planning their temporary housing situation. Make sure Ray doesn't smoke inside for the first few days, Beulah had written. We need to keep up appearances until we're settled. Once the old lady gets used to us being there, she won't be able to kick us out without looking like the bad guy. What about Kent? Dolores had replied. Think he'll catch on? Kent's clueless. He feels guilty about his mom being alone and wants to take care of everyone. Perfect mama's boy syndrome. As long as I keep him happy in bed and cook his favorite meals, he'll do whatever I say. I felt sick. Actually, physically sick. I ran to the bathroom and barely made it before throwing up everything I'd eaten that morning. When I came back to the office, I heard voices in the hallway. Panic shot through me. If they found me with these papers, if they knew I'd discovered their plan. I quickly gathered everything back into the folder and shoved it into my purse. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely zip it closed. "Paulette?" Dolores called from the kitchen. "You still here, honey?" "Just finishing up," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. I walked out through the living room where Crystal was still on her phone. "Yeah, we'll probably be here another year at least," she was saying. "Maybe longer if things work out right." She looked right at me when she said it, smiling. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling from what I'd discovered. When I got to my apartment, I spread all the papers out on my kitchen table and read through everything again, hoping I'd misunderstood something. But there was no misunderstanding. Every detail was there in black and white. Beulah had researched my son like he was a business opportunity. She'd planned to use my love for Kent to get money and housing for her entire family. They'd moved into the house I'd given him with no intention of ever leaving. The worst part was realizing how easily they'd manipulated me. Every time I'd brought groceries, every time I'd cleaned their messes, every time I'd bitten my tongue when they were rude, I'd been playing right into their hands. The Grateful Daughter-in-Law Act had been just that, an act. But as I sat there surrounded by evidence of their deception, something else began to grow alongside my heartbreak. Anger. Cold, calculated anger. They thought they were so clever. They thought they'd found the perfect mark in a lonely old woman who just wanted her son to be happy. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I'd been a school secretary for 43 years. I knew how to keep records, how to document everything, how to build an airtight case. And most importantly, I knew that in all their clever planning, they'd made one crucial mistake. The house deed was still in my name. I spent 3 sleepless nights staring at those papers before I made my first move. 43 years as a school secretary had taught me that documentation was everything, and emotions were the enemy of good planning. So I planned. First, I made copies of everything I'd found. Then I organized it all chronologically, creating a timeline that showed exactly how Beulah had targeted my son and manipulated our family. The dating website profiles, the text messages, the emails planning their invasion of the house I'd given Kent. All of it went into a neat folder labeled Evidence. But before I could act on any of it, I needed to understand the legal situation. Monday morning found me in the office of Robert Harrison, the attorney who'd handled my divorce 20 years earlier. "Paulette," he said, settling his reading glasses on his nose as he reviewed the house documents I'd brought. "This is interesting. Very interesting. What do you mean?" He looked up at me with something that might have been admiration. "You never actually transferred full ownership to Kent. The deed shows you as the primary owner with Kent listed as beneficiary upon your death or upon your written consent to transfer." My heart skipped. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means you still own the house. Kent has the right to live there, but he doesn't have the legal authority to make major decisions about the property without your consent, and he certainly can't allow others to establish residency there without your permission." I felt a surge of something I hadn't experienced in months, hope. "So, if I wanted them out?" "You could legally evict any residents who aren't on the deed and don't have your written permission to be there." Robert leaned back in his chair. "Of course, that would likely create some family drama." Family drama, if only he knew. What would I need to do? Formal eviction notice. 30 days is standard, but given the circumstances, you might be able to argue for immediate removal if you can prove they're damaging the property or harassing you. I thought about Ray's cigarette smell embedded in the walls, about Crystal's belongings scattered throughout every room, about the way they ordered me around like their personal servant. "I can prove harassment," I said quietly. That afternoon, I went back to the house with a different purpose. Instead of watering plants and cleaning up after Beulah's family, I documented everything. I took photos of the cigarette damage, the broken cabinet door Ray had never mentioned, the stains on the carpet that hadn't been there before they moved in. More importantly, I started recording conversations. "Paulette, thank God you're here," Dolores said when I walked in. She was sitting at the kitchen table in her bathrobe again, dirty dishes piled around her. "Can you clean this up? And maybe run to the store? We're out of everything." I pulled out my phone and set it on the counter, pretending to check messages while it recorded. "I'm not really here to clean today. I said carefully. I just wanted to check on the house. Dolores's expression shifted. What do you mean, check on the house? This is Kent's house now. You gave it to him. I gave it to Kent, yes. But I didn't give it to you. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Crystal appeared from the hallway, still in pajamas, though it was after 2 in the afternoon. Is there a problem here? She asked, her tone challenging. No problem, I said evenly. I was just explaining to your mother that this arrangement was supposed to be temporary. Crystal laughed, but there was no humor in it. Temporary according to who? We're family now. Kent wants us here. Does he? Because I haven't heard him say that directly. Kent says a lot of things when you're not around, Dolores said, her fake sweetness completely gone now. He's tired of you always coming over here, checking up on us like we're children. He's a married man now. He doesn't need his mommy hovering all the time. Each word was designed to hurt, and they succeeded. But I kept my expression neutral and my phone recording. I see, I said. Well, I suppose Kent and I should have a conversation about that. Good luck with that, Crystal smirked. Beulah's got him pretty well trained these days. He knows where his loyalty should be. I left with hours of recorded evidence, but my heart was breaking. They weren't just stealing my gift house. They were stealing my son. That evening, I called Kent's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later. Same thing. Finally, I called the house landline. Beulah answered. Oh, hi, Paulette, she said, her voice artificially bright. Kent can't come to the phone right now. Is he there? He's very busy with some work projects. Maybe you could call back another time? Beulah, I need to speak with my son. There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. The fake sweetness was gone, replaced by something cold and hard. Paulette, I think we need to have an honest conversation. Kent's been feeling really stressed about your constant visits. You're always showing up unannounced, criticizing how we keep the house, making everyone uncomfortable. He's asked me to talk to you about giving us some space. He asked you to talk to me? He doesn't want to hurt your feelings, but this can't continue. We're adults. We don't need you checking up on us all the time. I felt the familiar ache in my chest, the same feeling I'd had when Kent was a teenager pushing for independence. But this was different. This was manipulation disguised as natural progression. I understand, I said quietly. Maybe you're right. I'm so glad you see it that way. Beulah's voice brightened again. I knew you'd understand once someone explained it properly. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone. They'd completely cut me off from my own son. But instead of despair, I felt that cold anger solidifying into determination. The next morning, I drove to Robert Harrison's office with my phone full of recordings and my camera full of photos. This changes things significantly, he said after reviewing everything. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is harassment, possibly fraud, and definitely unlawful occupation of your property. What are my options? Immediate eviction. Based on what you've shown me, we can argue that they're damaging your property and preventing you from having normal access to your own home. I can have papers drawn up by tomorrow. Do it. Paulette, are you sure about this? Once we serve these papers, there's no going back. Your relationship with Kent might be permanently damaged. I thought about the text messages I'd found, about Beulah planning to manipulate me from the very beginning, about Crystal laughing at how perfectly their plan had worked, about my son, who was either complicit in their scheme or so thoroughly manipulated he couldn't see what was happening. My relationship with Kent was damaged the moment he let them treat me like their servant, I said. At least this way, I'll have my dignity back. Robert nodded slowly. I'll need you to document any future interactions with them. And Paulette? Once we serve these papers, they're going to fight back. Are you prepared for that? I thought about 43 years of dealing with difficult parents, angry students, and administrative bureaucracy. I thought about raising Kent as a single mother after his father left, working 2 jobs to pay for his college, sacrificing my own comfort to give him every opportunity. Let them try, I said. The eviction papers were served on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9 o'clock. I wasn't there to see their faces, but I heard about it soon enough. My phone started ringing at 9:15. "What the hell is this?" Crystal's voice was shrill with panic when I answered. "You can't kick us out. This is Kent's house." "It's my house," I said calmly. "And you have 30 days to remove yourselves and all your belongings. You can't do this. We have rights. Actually, you don't. You're not on the lease because there is no lease. You're not on the deed because it's not your house. You're squatters, and now you're evicted squatters." The line went dead. 2 minutes later, Kent was calling. "Mom, what's going on?" "Beulah just called me crying, saying you're trying to throw them out on the street." My heart ached hearing the confusion in his voice. "Kent, we need to talk. Can you meet me somewhere? Just you and me? I can't just abandon my wife when she's upset like this. Can't you just explain over the phone why you're doing this?" "Because they've been lying to you, Kent. All of them. From the very beginning." There was a long pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Beulah targeted you on a dating website specifically because she found out about our family's financial situation. I mean, her family never intended to move out of the house. I mean, they've been planning this whole thing for over a year." "That's ridiculous. Beulah loves me." "Beulah loves your bank account and the house I gave you, and the fact that I've been supporting her entire family for months." "Mom, you're upset. I get it. But you can't just make accusations like this without proof." "I have proof. Meet me at Denny's on Main Street in 1 hour and I'll show you everything." Another pause. "I'll be there." I arrived early and spread the papers across a corner booth. The dating website profiles, the text messages between Beulah and Crystal, the emails planning their takeover of the house. Everything organized chronologically, just like I'd done for difficult parents during my years at the school. Kent walked in looking tired and stressed. He'd lost weight since the wedding, I noticed. His face was drawn and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Mom," he said, sliding into the booth across from me, "before you show me whatever this is, I need you to know that Beulah's family is going through a really hard time. They lost their apartment, they don't have much money, and—" "Kent." I pushed the first document across the table. "Read this." It was Beulah's profile from Wealthy Connections. Calm, with her search parameters clearly visible. His face went pale as he read. "I don't understand. She told me she wasn't really using dating sites when we met." "Keep reading." I watched my son's face change as he worked through the evidence. The confusion gave way to shock, then to something harder. When he got to the text messages between Beulah and Crystal planning to manipulate me into buying them a house, his hands started shaking. "This can't be real," he whispered. "I found these in your desk when you asked me to look for those tax documents. They fell out of another folder." He read the message about him being a perfect mama's boy with something that looked like grief. "She wrote this about me?" "She wrote all of it about us. We weren't people to them, Kent. We were opportunities." Kent stared at the papers for a long time without speaking. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. "How long have you known?" "About a week. I wanted to tell you right away, but I needed to make sure I had everything documented properly." "A week." He ran his hands through his hair. "I've been defending them to you for a week while you knew they were. Using us? Yes. The house, the groceries, the way they talked to you." He trailed off as pieces fell into place. "God, Mom, the way they talked to you. I thought it was just their personality, but they were doing it on purpose, weren't they? Making you feel small." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "And I let them. I let them treat my mother like their servant because my wife told me you needed to learn boundaries." His voice cracked. "What kind of son does that make me?" "A son who wanted his marriage to work. A son who trusted the woman he loved. That's not your fault, Kent, isn't it? You raised me better than this. You taught me to protect the people I love, and instead I protected the people who were hurting you." We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Kent gathered up all the papers and put them back in order. "What happens now?" he asked. "They have 30 days to move out. After that, the sheriff will remove them." "And Beulah?" "That's up to you." "But Kent, You need to understand something. They're not going to go quietly. Now that they know I have proof of what they've been doing, they're going to fight back. They're going to try to make you choose between me and your wife." As if on cue, Kent's phone buzzed. Then again. Then it started ringing. "It's Beulah," he said, staring at the screen. "Answer it." He hesitated, then swiped to accept the call. "Hello?" Even from across the table, I could hear Beulah's voice, high and panicked. "Kent, where are you? Your mother's gone crazy. She's trying to steal our house." "It's her house, Beulah." "What?" "No. You told me she gave it to us. As a wedding gift." "She gave it to me, not to your family." "My family is your family now. Kent, you're scaring me. Where are you? Come home right now so we can talk about this properly." Kent looked at me across the table. I could see the war going on in his face. Part of him still loved his wife, still wanted to believe there was some explanation for everything. "I'm talking to my mother right now," he said finally. "Your mother is trying to break up our marriage. Can't you see that? She's jealous because you have a wife now, because you don't need her anymore. She's making up stories to turn you against me." "What stories?" "She's claiming I only married you for money. It's ridiculous and hurtful. And I can't believe you're even listening to her." Kent looked down at the papers in front of him, at Beulah's own words printed in black and white, describing exactly how she'd planned to use him. "Beulah," he said quietly, "did you ever love me?" The pause that followed was too long. When she finally answered, her voice had changed. "Of course I love you. What kind of question is that? Kent, you're really starting to worry me. Your mother's been filling your head with poison and you're not thinking clearly. Just come home so we can straighten this out. Answer the question. Do you love me, or do you love what I could give you?" Another pause. Then, "I can't believe you're asking me this. After everything we've built together, after everything my family has sacrificed to help us." "Your family hasn't sacrificed anything." Kent's voice rose, causing other diners to look over. "Your family has been living rent-free in my house, eating food my mother bought, treating her like their personal maid while you told me she needed to learn boundaries." "Kent, calm down. You're being emotional and—" "Emotional? My wife has been lying to me since the day we met, using my mother's love for me to steal from both of us. And you think I'm being emotional? I never stole anything from anyone." Kent looked at the papers again. "Wealthy connections? Com, Beulah, minimum income $75,000. Home ownership required. Family wealth preferred." "Should I read your profile out loud?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Beulah's voice came back, but it was different now, colder. "So what if I was practical about dating? Everyone has preferences." "Practical?" Kent's voice was barely controlled. "You researched my family's finances before you even met me. And you benefited from that. I made sure you had a wife who could help your family, who could take care of your mother when you couldn't take care of her. You turned her into your unpaid housekeeper. She needed purpose. Old people get depressed when they don't feel useful." I watched my son's face as he heard his wife's true feelings for the first time. The mask had finally slipped completely. "Don't call me again," Kent said quietly. "Don't text me. Don't contact my mother. You have 30 days to get out of the house, and then I never want to see any of you again." "You can't mean that. Kent, I'm your wife." "No," he said, looking at me with tears in his eyes. "You're a stranger who stole 2 years of my life." He hung up and turned off his phone. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I'm so incredibly sorry." The 30 days passed like a slow-motion explosion. Beulah's family didn't go quietly. They tried everything from tearful phone calls to showing up at my apartment building to having distant relatives contact me with guilt trips about breaking up a marriage. Dolores even had the audacity to call my former workplace, trying to convince my old colleagues that I was having some kind of mental breakdown. But I'd spent 43 years dealing with manipulative people who thought they could bully their way to what they wanted. Beulah's family had picked the wrong retired school secretary to mess with. Kent filed for divorce on day 10. Beulah contested it, of course. demanding spousal support and half of everything Kent owned. That's when Robert Harrison earned every penny of his fee by presenting all the evidence of fraud and manipulation we'd compiled. The case was settled quickly after that, with Beulah getting nothing except a warning from the judge about marriage fraud. The house was empty by day 28. They'd left it in terrible condition, of course. Cigarette burns on the hardwood floors, holes in the walls where Ray had hung things incorrectly, stains on the carpet that would never come out. But it was empty, and it was ours again. Kent and I spent a week cleaning and repairing the damage together. It was good work, honest work that helped heal something between us that had been broken. We didn't talk much during those days, just worked side by side scrubbing and painting and slowly restoring the house to what it had been before Beulah's family had invaded it. On the last day, as we stood in the living room looking at the fresh paint and clean carpets, Kent finally spoke about what had happened. "I keep thinking I should have known," he said, running his hand along the mantelpiece I'd stripped and refinished. "All the signs were there. The way they treated you, the way Beulah always steered conversations toward money, the way her family just assumed they could move in permanently. You trusted the woman you loved," I said. "That's not a character flaw, Kent. That's what love is supposed to look like. But I stopped protecting you. I let them make you feel small and unwelcome, and I told myself it was normal boundary setting. I set down my cleaning supplies and really looked at my son. He'd aged in the past month, but it was a good aging. The soft, confused look he'd worn since marrying Beulah was gone, replaced by something clearer and stronger. Kent, do you remember when you were 16 and you got caught cheating on that history test?" He nodded, looking puzzled by the change of subject. "You were so angry at me for calling Mrs. Peterson and setting up a meeting. You said I was embarrassing you, that I didn't trust you, that you were old enough to handle your own problems." "I remember. I was horrible to you for weeks. But you learned something from it. And eventually you thanked me for caring enough to step in when you were making bad choices. I don't understand what that has to do with, this was the same thing, just 20 years later. You were making bad choices because you couldn't see the situation clearly. You were angry at me for interfering, but eventually, you understood that I was trying to protect you." Kent was quiet for a long moment. Except this time, the stakes were higher than a failing grade. Much higher, but the principle was the same. Sometimes people who love you have to make hard choices to protect you, even when you don't want to be protected. He walked over to the window that looked out on the backyard, where I'd planted a small garden the spring before his wedding. Beulah's family had let it die, but I could see new growth starting to emerge from the roots. "What happens now?" he asked. "Do you want me to move out? Find my own place?" The question surprised me. "Do you want to move out?" "I don't know. This house was supposed to be our fresh start, mine and Beulah's. Now it just feels like a reminder of how badly I screwed up." I joined him at the window, watching a robin hop across the lawn. Or it could be a reminder of how strong you are when you choose to see the truth instead of believing convenient lies. "What do you mean? You could have stayed with her, Kent. Even after seeing all the evidence, you could have chosen to believe her explanations, to convince yourself that love could overcome the lies. A lot of people would have." "The thought crossed my mind," he admitted quietly. "For about 5 minutes in that diner, I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation for everything. But you didn't. You chose the hard truth over the comfortable lie. That takes courage." It didn't feel like courage. It felt like my world was falling apart. Sometimes those are the same thing. We finished the last of the cleaning in comfortable silence. As we packed up the supplies, Kent turned to me with a question I'd been expecting. "Mom, can I ask you something? Why didn't you transfer the deed completely when you gave me the house? Most people would have signed everything over. I'd been wondering when he'd figure that out." Honestly, at the time, I told myself it was just being cautious with paperwork. But looking back, I think some part of me sensed that something wasn't right. Not about you, but about the whole situation. Your instincts saved us both. My instincts and 43 years of dealing with people who think they're smarter than everyone else. Kent laughed, and it was the first real laugh I'd heard from him since before the wedding. "Remind me never to try to pull a fast one on you." "As if you could. I change your diapers, young man. I know all your tells. We locked up the house and stood together on the front porch. The evening air was cool and clean, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe properly. So what now? Kent asked. Do you want to sell the house? Move somewhere new? I looked at the house I'd sacrificed so much to give him. The house that had become a symbol of betrayal and manipulation, and felt something unexpected. Peace. I want you to keep it, I said. This is your home, Kent. Don't let them take that away from you too. Are you sure? I'm sure. But I want to transfer the deed properly this time. No safety nets, no backup plans. It'll be completely yours. What if I make another mistake? What if I trust the wrong person again? Then you'll learn from it and move on. That's what adults do. And what about you? Where will you live? I smiled, thinking about the small apartment I'd grown to love over the past few months. I'm quite happy where I am, thank you. It's quiet, it's mine, and nobody expects me to do their laundry. I could come visit you sometimes. Maybe we could have dinner once a week, just the two of us. I'd like that very much. 6 months later, I was sitting in my kitchen reading the newspaper when Kent called with news. Mom, I have something to tell you. My heart jumped slightly. After everything we'd been through, unexpected phone calls still made me nervous. I met someone, he continued quickly. Her name is Sarah, and she's a teacher at the elementary school near my office. She knows everything about what happened with Beulah, and she thinks you sound like someone she'd like to meet. Oh? She suggested that maybe the three of us could have dinner sometime, if you're interested. I smiled, thinking about how different this sounded from the way Beulah had avoided spending time with me from the very beginning. I'd love to meet her, I said. But Kent? Yeah? This time, let's have dinner at my place first. I make an excellent pot roast, and I'd like to get to know her before you get too serious. You want to vet her? I want to love her. But I also want to make sure she's someone worth loving. Kent laughed. Deal. And Mom? Thank you. For what? For saving me. For saving us both. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and thought about the past year. I'd given away a house and gotten something much more valuable in return. My son's respect, my own self-worth, and the knowledge that I was stronger than anyone who tried to manipulate me. Beulah's family had thought they were so clever, targeting a lonely old woman and her naive son. They'd seen us as easy marks, people who could be used and discarded when they were no longer useful. They'd been wrong about everything except one thing. I was a woman who would sacrifice anything for her family. But they'd forgotten that sometimes the greatest sacrifice is refusing to enable the people you love when they're making destructive choices. I still had the folder of evidence locked away in my desk drawer, though I doubted I'd ever need it again. Sometimes I thought about Beulah and her family, wondering where they'd ended up, whether they'd found other people to use. But mostly, I didn't think about them at all. I had better things to do with my time than waste it on people who'd never deserved a place in my life. I had a son who called me every week, a small garden on my balcony that was finally thriving, and the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing you fought for what mattered and won. Some battles are worth fighting, even when they break your heart, especially then. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.